Man, I woke up an hour too early, man, for a consultation that I have coming up. So instead of going back to bed, man, I figured I'd chat with my brothers about what I've been thinking about over the last couple of hours, man. And what I've been thinking about over the last couple of hours, brothers, is probably one of the most powerful conversations we can have, man. I was thinking about my thoughts started by thinking about the book Outwitting the Devil, right? Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. I've talked about it a million times over the last probably 4 or 5 years. And normally when people are having a conversation about that book, it's mostly about some part of the conversation where he's having, quote unquote, the interview with the devil. It's normally from one of the nuggets picked up from there, right? But to be honest, man, of all the things I took away from that book, where we're talking about drifting, whether we're talking about a man's sexual energy and its connection to his financial status, right? And a plethora of other things that are in that book. The thing that burns a hole in my chest is the conversation that happens at the beginning of the book, before it even gets to the meat of the book, when Napoleon is talking about when he found that other me. You know what I'm saying? He called it that other me. And for those that haven't read the book, just real quick, there was a point in time where Napoleon was on the run from some mobsters and some other things. His money was at zero, and he was at a dead end. And he was trying to make a power move, man. He was trying to make a quantum leap. He ended up borrowing like $50 from his brothers, right? Which back then was probably like $300 or $400, right? And anyway, he found himself in this situation, man, where he was getting ready to check into this hotel, and he said all of a sudden this voice spoke to him, and this voice was telling him to move in a different manner. And in this book, he called that voice that other me. In other words, he said it was me that I was hearing, but it was a version of me that had no fear, a version of me that stood 100% on faith, like was just calling plays like a pro, in other words, right? And he said this voice was instructing me on how to move. And long story short, all the moves this quote unquote other me was instructing him to take was completely different than the moves he would have made in the state that he was currently in, because he was currently in this state of just fear, lack of abundance, and everything else that could go wrong, right? And he said this decision. Matter of fact, in the book, I'll just tell you the example. And it's 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, man. So yeah, I might ramble a little bit. I just want to chat with my brothers, man. The decision that made him understand what was going on, I think it was just, he had like $50 to his name, right? He had bought from his brother, and he was checking into this hotel, and he could have got a room that was like maybe $10-15 per night, which would have gave him some grace, gave him a few days. But this voice said, no, get the suite, take all this money and put it on one room for one night. He was like, that just don't make no sense. And the voice told him to do it, right? Long story short, he got this room. He was inspired. These ideas came, and he started moving, and it played out to be, the Napoleon Hill that we know today, right? And I was thinking about that, man. And I said, you know what? It's like everything comes down to choices. This is what I was thinking. I said, in every single scenario, every single thing that comes our way, there are two different choices we can make in every scenario. We can make a choice where we're standing on faith, or we can make a choice where we're standing on fear, right? And to be honest, as I was thinking about it, I said, not only is this something we have to be aware of, I said, this is actually our superpower. This is actually our superpower. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I know y'all heard those birds chirping in the back, man. And when we think about nature, when we think about all these animals and what they can do, some can fly, some can change colors, some can do all these things, some can breathe in the water for several months at a time or whatever, right? Our superpower as humans is being able to think and operate from that other me. It's our superpower. And the reason I say it's our superpower, man, because if you look at all of these movies that a lot of us, a lot of us look at, whether it's Marvel movies or whatever kind of movies, it's the same storyline. It's about a person that's been operating in a certain state, but life changes when they learn to operate from that other me, right? And we call it different things. And I'm gonna tell you this, like one of my favorite movie in the world, if I had to pick one movie, and I've said it a million times, is Limitless, right? I've literally watched Limitless. I'm gonna sit here and say over 100 times, but it's easily over 200, literally, right? And I've been watching that movie for years, man. And there's this one scene that I was observing, man, just several months ago. And I said, how did I never understand what was taking place in that scene? And for y'all that have seen the movie, man, it's the moment when the character started making that transition. When he began to become aware that he had this knowledge, that he had this power. I use that word, that he could tap into. And in this scene, of course, he had taken this pill, right, which is right, and he's sitting on this stairwell, and all of a sudden the lights get brighter, right, which lets you know his consciousness, this other me, is entering the room, and he turns around and looks behind him, and it's him. It's a splitting image of him coming up the stairs behind him, but this image of him has a completely different expression on his face. This image of him is looking at him like why are you operating in such a lower manner, right? This figure of him comes up the stairs, and they become one entity, one singular truth, like I'm always talking about. And from that moment, he's operating and he's speaking from a different plane. And as he speaks from that plane, his world turns into what it turned into, for y'all that haven't seen the movie. And I'll say, this is our superpower, man. And you can look at all these other movies, man. You can look at, and I don't watch too much Marvel. I catch them when I catch them, man. But a lot of them have that same storyline. Even like when we're thinking about, like when we were growing up, like like the Incredible Hulks. It's the same thing. It may look a little different, but it's always depicting one character, two versions of themselves, and one has a superpower. You know what I'm saying? I would say that Incredible Hulk is more of a light and dark energy, but it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. You know what I'm saying? Think about this, and this just hit my mind. Think about this. It's the same thing even in some comedies. What's the movie? Is it Dr. Dolittle with Eddie Murphy? Well, Eddie Murphy was just this big nerdy kind of chunky guy, but when he took this potion, he became, I think his name was like Dr. Love or Mr. Love, if I'm not getting those movies mixed up. He was a completely different character. Ladies loved him, swag, confident. And of course, these examples, they, it kind of go from different, but it's the same theory, man. So all I'm saying is, life is about choices, right? All I'm saying is we have to understand that our superpower is being aware at all times of this power. I'm not saying that. Is being aware of all times of this ability to choose which version of ourselves we're going to operate from. I'm gonna say it again. I want to make sure I said it right. Our superpower, or the way we should navigate this life if we want to walk in our highest vibrations, is to operate in this other me, right? It's to operate in this other me. And in order to operate in this other version of ourselves, it's not even about a certain knowledge we have to have. It's not even about, we gotta click our shoes together 3 times. It's like there is no think about this. There's no process that has to be done before. It just has to be done. And when I say it has to be done, life is about understanding that at all times there are two choices to be made, two choices that you have to choose to operate from. And the only thing to do is to do it. That's why you see some people, man, that have 30,000 degrees, some people that were born into billions, some people that just, know a certain thing. And then you have some people, man, that were just, hey man, I was just born on the wrong side of the tracks, and I woke up one day and now I'm known across the world and all these other things. And it's like they have the same end result, but the way of getting there was completely different. Because the way to get there is not a walk of knowledge. It's just the fact of doing the thing. You know what I'm saying? It's just a matter of doing the thing. So I would say our superpower, this is really what I want to talk about, is just be, look at some water, man. I'm over here dehydrated. Just be aware that whatever situation comes your way, right? And we can name a million situations. We can name good times, we can name bad times, we can name the times when the lights were about to get cut off, when the car was about to get repoed. We can name situations where you go to your job and they're just laying everybody off, and HR's walking down the hallway, knocking on doors, and you're next. You know what I'm saying? We can talk about you being in the hospital and the doctor is saying, hey, it don't look good and I'll be right back. Let me look at these charts, Luke. We can name 1,000,001 different scenarios, but every single scenario that you find yourself in, it's all about which state of being are you going to choose to operate in, regardless of the situation. What state of being are you going to choose to operate in? And all I'm saying is we have a choice. Like when I'm talking about those two versions of ourselves, we have a choice to operate out of either in fear or a choice to operate in a knowing. I'm going to say it again. We have a choice to operate out of fear and a choice to operate out of knowing. And like I'm always saying, man, like the majority of people are waking up every day and they're waiting on the world to tell them what is. They're waking up every day, they're looking at their social media feed to see what the latest and greatest is, and what kind of energy we should be in. They're waking up, they're still reading the newspapers, if anybody's still reading the newspaper. They're listening to the news and all these other things, and they're doing that to say, hey, you know what energy am I supposed to be in today? Who am I supposed to be today? You know what I'm saying? So, and I say, and like I've always said, man, I said instead of us responding to the world, like in those scenarios I just gave, the world is responding to us. So if the world is responding to us, think about this. If the world is waiting to respond to us, that must mean that we have a choice. That must mean that the world is saying, hey, which mode are they going to operate in? So it's just a conscious, it's just an awareness, man. It's just an awareness. And it's an awareness that you have to be aware of 24 hours a day. Because even the smallest of decisions is going to impact the rest of your day, impact the rest of your life. Of course, the scenarios I gave, man, the bills are like the doctor is saying this and all this, the job, all these other scenarios, they are major scenarios. Like if the way we operate in those scenarios is how the world is going to be. But every scenario is that big. Every scenario is that big. The smallest of decisions. Which state are you operating in? So, yeah, man, that's all I want to share on my brothers. Let me get ready for this call. I hope this was some good information for y'all, brothers.